races. Make C-SPAN your primary source for campaign 2018. Next, Senator Dianne Feinstein and her opponent, fellow Democrat and State Senator Kevin De Leon, debate the issues in California's U.S. Senate race. From the San Francisco Public Policy Institute, this is an hour and 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Donna Lucas, and I'm happy to welcome you here on behalf of the PPIC Board of Directors. We are pleased to present this program today featuring the two candidates for United States Senate. Thank you, State Senator De Leon, and thank you, U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, for joining us today for this important discussion. This event is part of the PPIC 2018 Speaker Series on California's Future. We would like to thank our sponsors of this series for their underwriting support. These organizations are listed on the screen and on the back of your program. Let's take a moment to thank them. This series is also funded by the PPIC Donor Circle and the PPIC Corporate Circle, groups of individuals, organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Please consider joining as a sponsor or a donor so that we can continue to do amazing programs like this and provide great free lunches. Thank you. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. In PPIC, we're always trying to gauge public opinion, so later today you'll be asked your thoughts about the program through an email. Could you please respond to that? That would be terrific. Also, please take a moment to silence your cell phone so we won't get interrupted. And now, onto the program. It is my pleasure to introduce our amazing President and CEO, Mark Baldassari, who will moderate today's conversation. Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Donna. And welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce the two candidates for U.S. Senator who are here with us today. And we look forward to the conversation. You can learn more about State Senator De Leon and U.S. Senator Feinstein in the program, so I won't go over what are very distinguished records, which they both bring to their candidacies for this office, but they both have very distinguished records and want to point that out, and you can learn more about them in the program. I do want to say a few things about PPIC, just for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We're nonpartisan. We're a nonprofit. We don't take any positions on candidates or parties or ballot measures. We do programs like this, and as Donna mentioned, we've had several programs this year, including one other candidate conversation that we had this year, because we want Californians to learn firsthand from and directly from their leaders about how they are approaching the challenges and opportunities that face California today. So that's really our purpose in doing this. Whenever we have candidates on stage, we have to make sure that we go out of our way to ensure fairness. And for that reason, we have set some time limits on the answers, and I've heard from both parties involved that they won't exceed these time limits. And that's good news for me because that means we can ask more questions of them and get more issues. But we have that. We will alternate the responses, and my colleagues are going to help me with that here today, who are sitting in the front row, so that that fairness is ensured. And if at any point I feel like there might be a need for a quick rebuttal, I'll give an opportunity for a quick rebuttal, but otherwise we'll we'll go on to the first question. Then there's one thing that everybody in the audience can help me out with, and this is maybe you've got the hardest job of all today, and that is that I have to ask you to refrain from applause, because actually applause takes time away from conversation. And so let's just kind of like get it all out of our systems now and applaud for these two fantastic candidates. All right. We'll have another chance to do that in about an hour, but I want to take every minute we can on stage today with these two individuals. And let me start out with a question which we sent in advance. It's a very general question, then we'll follow up with a series of other questions. And the first question will go to Senator De Leon, and then the same question will go to Senator Feinstein, just so that you understand what the format's going to be. And that is, first of all, if you're elected to the US Senate, what will be your top 3 priorities?
Well, Mark, first I want to say thank you. Thank you very much to you and to your staff. I want to thank my staff as well as Senator Feinstein's staff for making this happen. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. And I think this is a historic opportunity. I think the last time Senator Feinstein had an opponent on the same stage was about 18 years ago. So this is historic. And I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to be here with you today. I think these are very dangerous, consequential times in our nation's history. We are in a battle, we are engaged in the battle for America's soul against a president without one. I believe that the status quo in Washington is either unwilling or incapable to fight back. So I believe it's time that we stop biding our time and biting our tongue while this president unravels California's progress. Now, many know that I'm the youngest child, a single immigrant mother with a 3rd grade education. I'm a strong proponent of the California dream, but because I'm a direct product of the California dream, and I'm running in this US Senate race, not just because of who I am, but because of what I strongly believe we need to do. Now, we need someone in Washington that reflects our values, that is willing to step up and speak out and fight for you every single day. So, Mark, to answer your question, the issue of healthcare. I believe strongly that healthcare is a human right. It is not the exclusive rights of those who are the privileged or the wealthy. So I believe in Medicare for all, not Medicare for some. I believe that our nation has turned its backs on our family of immigrants. American children have been betrayed because they have their parents who are being pursued and hunted down by ICE agents. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, very personally, and I will fight to make sure we have comprehensive immigration reform. Climate change. This is an existential threat to our way of life, to our humanity, to our planet. And I want to put our nation on a track to 100% clean energy, a clean, renewable future, just like what I did here in California. I think that we cannot move California's progress forward if the status quo keeps resisting the resistance and the progress here in California. I do believe it's time for a new approach. I do believe it's time for a new voice, and it's time for a change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Senator Feinstein.
Thank you. Well, with representing the largest state in the union, there are a lot of obligations. And California is a major player on the Pacific Rim. So keeping this economy healthy and enabling people to earn a good living in this state becomes very important when you're 40+ million people. And so I think doing those things which move this economy forward, which improve our ability. For example, we're the largest agricultural state in the union. The exports are $20 billion a year. We employ huge numbers of people, many of them undocumented, providing a way, which I have introduced, of a blue card to make agricultural workers, some 50, 60,000 of them, legal to work in this country, to work in an industry that Americans do not work in. I think is very, very important. I think growing the economy is important, doing those things that educate our people to take better jobs, that produce better incomes, being able to build homes for people that they can afford is important. All of this, somehow, some way, always touches on government. It does on the local level, and it does on the national level. So I think being for those things that improve life for people in this great state and provide for their economic well-being are those things that I want to deal with and have been, and I'll describe that more as we go on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Feinstein, the next question comes to you, and then we'll go to Senator DeLeon. 85% of Californians in our most recent poll said that they supported a path to legal status for undocumented immigrants. I'm going to ask you the same question which I asked Leader Pelosi and Leader McCarthy when they were with us in a couple of forums in August. What steps would you take in the next Congress to move forward the proposals for immigration reform?
Well, first of all, I'm the lead Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. That is the committee that would handle immigration. If we are in the majority, if Democrats are in the majority, there will be a comprehensive immigration reform plan before our committee. We've been there before, about 5 years ago with one. It came out after weeks and maybe 100 amendments in committee, which is unusual, and passed the Senate and was never taken up by the House. There is a real need for a major immigration bill, and I believe that if Democrats control the United States Senate, you will see one come out of the committee and you will see one be passed by the Senate.
Thank you. What would you do?
Well, Mark, let me say what I just repeated a few moments ago, as I believe that our nation has turned its backs on our family of immigrants, that we have betrayed American children because we have hunted down their mothers and fathers, pursued them with our ICE agents. Let me tell you the story about Romolo, who's a constituent of mine. He's a hardworking, loving father of 2 daughters. Romolo from Highland Park was stopped and apprehended just 1 block before he was dropping off his daughter at her middle school. He was dehumanized right in front of his daughters, and he was detained and jailed. I and others intervened to secure his release. But Romolo's story is not unique as we know this. It's the story of millions of folks here in California and throughout the country. But because of the lack of action in Washington, I've had to lead in California by moving forward and protecting California families from Donald Trump, by moving forward sanctuary state measure, which is now the law of the land of the state of California. Even though we were sued by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, we had a Republican judge who stated very clearly it's constitutional, it's the law of the land of California. Because of the inaction in Washington, I've had to lead to provide tens of millions of dollars for legal resources for our young dreamers who know no other country but the United States of America, and know no other state than California. We need to do something immediately on this issue. We have a White House that has politicized ICE and is used it as a weapon for their own electoral gain throughout the country. And I think it is important to sort of contrast that the ICE was created through the Homeland Security Act. And the Homeland Security Act, our senior senator did vote for the Homeland Security Act, and therefore the creation of ICE agents that have lost their way instead of pursuing terrorists as well as criminal violent felons. They're pursuing mothers and fathers who are selling tamales, who are selling fruit on the street every single day. This is an issue, obviously, that I take very personal. My mother had the courage of her convictions to cross the border and to come to this country and work her fingers to the bone and put a roof over my head And if it wasn't for her and millions of others like her, because my story is not unique, it's not original. It's a story of so many other hardworking immigrants in California. But we need to have action in Washington, D.C. And the cruel reality is there has been no action for decades in Washington.
Let's move forward with another question. I was reading in the Los Angeles Times today that it is the one-year anniversary of the women who came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct in Sacramento. That was an issue which I know that you dealt with as the Senate Pro Tem last year when we were on the stage together last January. That was a very serious topic of discussion there. So I'd like to hear from you, what are the lessons that you've learned around the sexual misconduct allegations that will inform you going forward? And what are your thoughts about what Democrats are saying about the fact that if they take control of Congress, that the allegations that were raised about Brett Kavanaugh should be reviewed in more detail?
Well, let me say this, that I don't believe that any woman should suffer from sexual harassment and certainly sexual assault, especially when the only thing she's trying to do is do her job. I remember last year reading a letter that was signed by 140 women from the Capitol community. And it was a letter that had a huge impact on me. And I worked very closely with the female senators from the California State Senate. And together, under our leadership, we moved forward the most comprehensive internal reforms in the history of the California State Senate, where we actually now today outsource any independent investigation to a legal law firm that's free of any political influence. We established a 1-800 hotline, and we also created a climate survey, an anonymous climate survey, so all staff members could contribute their thoughts and their feelings about this issue of sexual harassment and sexual assaults. I think it's a model that we're very proud of, and I think it's a model that I'd like to take to Washington, D.C. I think that the U.S. Congress had a letter signed by over 1,000 women in the U.S. Congress, and to date, there's been no action by the members of the United States Congress. And I think Anita Hill actually got it right in her op-ed piece a few weeks ago in the New York Times, that when she was subjected to humiliation before the country, when another Supreme Court nominee was before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, she had wished that there was a process in the Senate Judiciary Committee as well as the U.S. Senate as a whole to deal with victims of sexual harassment and assault and those individuals who were coming before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee for a confirmation that they had a process, but no process existed. And I think we witnessed that during the hearings. And 30 years after Anita Hill, there is still no process in the U.S. Senate or overall the U.S. Congress. That's what I want to do, is I want to take that, and I think it's a model that we can use, because this is a cultural issue, and it's a societal issue that impacts all of our spaces. And I think men in particular have to take a very strong role, a leading role, to deal with this issue first and foremost, because it is men who are the vast majority of the perpetrators of both sexual assaults and harassment in this country.
And what about revisiting the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh?
I would say yes. I fought very hard to make sure that Brett Kavanaugh was not confirmed by the U.S. Senate. I made phone calls to Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, and led a phone bank operation in Los Angeles. So the answer is yes, unquestionably.
Senator Feinstein, you've been in the middle of this issue the last few weeks, and I'd like to hear from you lessons learned around how legislative leaders like yourself handle sexual misconduct allegations, and also what you think about the Democratic colleagues who think that those allegations against Brett Kavanaugh should be revisited.
Well, I'd be happy to discuss it. This isn't an easy picture. It's not a picture that's happened before that I know of. And I was the one that received the letter from the woman, the doctor in California. And it's had in 3 places, please keep this confidential. I called her the next day. She very much wanted it confidential. In my days, I've had a number of women come to me with allegations of sexual impropriety. And when they've asked me to keep it confidential, I have, particularly with young women, because it is really traumatic for them. And so I did, up to a point where it became public, and then that was a different story. This was a very difficult nomination for me. In the first place, it was the Supreme Court. It is the Supreme Court. And in the second place, although Democrats are not in control and therefore do not have the vote, it became very important to be able to say what we thought. And I think that record was created. I did not vote for Mr. Kavanaugh to be a member of the Supreme Court. As the ranking member, I argued against it to the best of my ability and argued on the floor against it. I think that as long as appointments are made in the way they're made, which is the president has the authority to make a judicial appointment, and we either, it's an advise and consent process. The problem is there's very little advice when the parties are different in the executive branch than they are in the legislative branch. There isn't the amount of consultation that would go on if this were a Democratic president with Democrats on the committee, and I think everybody can probably understand that. So it's a difficult circumstance. With respect to investigation, what we have is limited. We have a staff that can do investigation, but we don't have a law enforcement arm, in a civil proceeding that does any investigation. So we held the hearings and we took the vote, and you all know what that vote is. The process is what it is. And I don't know how much that can be changed, because the president appoints and we have an opportunity to confirm. And so it's confirm or not confirm. If it were a Democratic majority, this man would not have been confirmed to the Supreme Court.
So a quick follow-up, Senator Feinstein. Would you then be in favor or opposed to your colleagues who would want to open up the investigation of allegations against Brett Kavanaugh?
Oh, I'd be in favor of opening up the allegations, absolutely.
Okay. So next question to you. So more broadly, you've sort of raised the issue specifically here, but more broadly, the question that Democrats in Congress have today is, and for California leaders in general, is the areas in which you feel most strongly that you should resist what the Trump administration is doing. What are the areas that you feel most strongly that there should be resistance to what the Trump administration is doing? The other side of the coin is, are there areas where you think in the next session where Democrats could find common ground with either Republicans in Congress or the Trump administration?
Well, a big area that comes to me, largely because I'm on the Judiciary Committee, obviously is immigration. I do not believe in separation of children from their parents. I strongly fight it. I've written a bill. Every Democrat is on that bill. If we, in November, have a Democratic Senate, that bill will get passed to prohibit the separation of children from their parents. I find this just untenable and amazing. As a matter of fact, I think it was yesterday, I talked to my staff about where are children being placed in the state. And I've just learned that there's 7 different places. So I'm going to send my staff out to every place to look at it and go myself and look at it. I think we've got a big problem, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to take a deep look at immigration. And it's long overdue for comprehensive immigration reform. We had the bill out 5 years or so ago on the floor. It passed, but the House didn't take it up. And we need to look at our immigration system and see that it's humane and fair and is able to be carried out without chaos and without separation of minor children from their parents.
And any areas in which you think that Democrats can find common ground with Republicans in Congress or the Trump administration?
Oh, yes, on that area.
On that area in
I do believe
particular.
we would find
Okay.
common ground.
Senator De Leon, areas where California leaders should think about resisting the Trump administration, areas where there might be common ground with either Republicans in Congress or the Trump administration. Your thoughts?
Well, Mark, back in 2016, November 8th, late at night, I had made a decision, somewhat controversial, even among some Democrats, that I would help lead the resistance, because I think that we have to do everything within our power to protect our economic prosperity, to protect our values, and to protect our people. Unfortunately, this president has not held back. He said very clearly he was going to come after our immigrant families. He said very clearly that he was going to unravel any climate change progress by pulling out of the Paris Accords. It was very clearly that he went after Muslims with the Muslim ban, by going after California's fuel efficiency standards. It's very clear what this president set out to do. And unfortunately, sadly, he's been quite successful. And it's been California who's been the leading voice for the entire nation. And that's why the world looks towards California for leadership, not towards Washington, D.C., on the issue of climate change, on the issue of immigration reform, because there's been inaction in Washington, D.C., because it's so deeply dysfunctional right now in Washington, D.C. Like I said, I'd had to lead to protect our immigrant families from Donald Trump by establishing a sanctuary state. This is very important because there is a contrast in terms of leadership. Had the senior senator been successful in moving forward a law prohibiting the establishment of sanctuary cities in Washington, D.C., and I'm glad that she didn't follow through, I would not have been able to protect California families by moving forward Senate Bill 54, the California Values Act. Because the president pulled out of the Paris Accords, I had to double down on 100% clean energy. And now California is the largest economy on the planet to legally mandate 100% clean energy. This is something that can be done for the entire nation. I believe strongly, regardless of partisanship in ideology, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference if you're Democrat or Republican. We still breathe the same dirty, crappy air into our lungs. And it doesn't, pollution and climate change does not discriminate. Unfortunately, it does discriminate against people of color and those who are among the poorest, who will disproportionately take the brunt of the consequences of climate change. On the issue of immigration, we have no other choice. We have to move forward. I do agree with Senator Feinstein that there are Republicans who are reasonable on the Hill, both in the U.S. Senate as well as the Congress, the lower house, that want to find a lasting measure that we can move forward. But we have Steve Miller, and we have the Chris Kovacs, and we have others who will unravel anything that moves forward. And that's why I've always said very clearly, you cannot trust this president, because he will continuously move the goalpost on all. He's done it to all members of Congress continuously. It's almost like when Lucy puts the football and asks Charlie Brown to come kick the ball, and Lucy always takes the ball away, and Charlie Brown falls down, square in his butt. So we need a new president in 2020 is what we need.
Thank you. So when I look at the public opinion polling in California,